Welcome to Rudicorn Reviews. I'll be taking a look at Devil May Cry 1, which first came out on the PS2 in 2001, and has since been given an HD release for PS3 and Xbox 360. Devil May Cry 1 being known as the beginning of the character action genre, I thought it'd be a good place to start. For the time being, I want to focus these reviews only on character action titles. If you'd like to know more about Devil May Cry, or character action in general, check out my other video, What is the Character Action Genre? Since this is the first review, I want to give a rundown on how I'm going to structure these reviews. I'm not going to give them an arbitrary score of 1 to 10. Instead, I'll give my thoughts and say if I think it's bad, unplayable, great, etc. And I'll let you know if I recommend it or not. The main focus is going to be on the combat and how accessible the game is, but I'm still going to go over the other aspects of the game and what I think of them. Okay, let's get on with the review. I first played DMC1 on the PS3 using its backward compatibility with PS2 games. Soon after beating DMC1, I went on to play DMC2 and DMC3. Maybe it's because I burned through them in a weekend, but I don't remember too much from the first game other than the general story and locations. Some enemies as well. Since deciding to review this game, I've played and replayed it a few times, and I'm not too sure how to feel about it. I'm mostly referring to how the combat feels, but I'll go more into that in a second. The opening cutscene gives some backstory. A long time ago, there was a war between the human world and the underworld. Sparta, a demon from the underworld, stood up to fight for the humans. He kept harmony until his death. Now, the hero of our game, Dante, is a demon hunter and the son of the legendary Dark Knight Sparta. He's visited by Trish, a mysterious lady that looks oddly like Dante's mother. She gives us some more backstory and sets up our main antagonist, Mundus. They head to Malay Island where Mundus is trying to return to the human world. The story is mostly non-existent, although what is there can be pretty entertaining and cheesy. Dante and Trish land on Malay Island and Trish immediately runs off to get a coffee or something. Seriously. She's barely in the story at all, and when she's in a scene, she'll only have a couple lines. Dante talks way more to the bosses than he does to Trish. It's a little weird. There also aren't even that many cutscenes in the game. Most of the cutscenes you see in-game will probably relate to a pathway opening up, or to introduce a new enemy or mechanic. The combined runtime of all the cutscenes from start to finish is probably around 40 to 45 minutes. With all that said, the story isn't that bad. It mostly serves to set up the main antagonist, and it doesn't leave any loose threads. Like I said, it's basic, but it is entertaining. The voice acting is about as good as you'd expect from a Capcom game of that era.
Nature calls? It's in the back.
Mighty is the power of Mundus.
I should have been the one to fill your dark soul with light!
This stinking hole was the last place I thought I'd find anyone with some guts.
The sound design in general is really good. Your attacks and impacts have a satisfying crunch to them. Enemies have a very noticeable sound effect when they're about to attack. Each one has a pretty unique sound effect to the different types of enemies. And the music is fantastic in my opinion. Whenever you aren't in battle and walking around the castle, the music is ambient and creepy. It feels like it fit right in with a survival horror game. When you fight an enemy, the music smoothly transitions to a battle theme. The battle theme is very energetic with hints of heavy metal and electronic beats. Bosses carry a similar tone, but they're still able to convey bosses' personality through it with different instruments or just adding a little bit extra. Even the main battle theme keeps some of the creepy tones heard around the castle. Alright, let's talk about the meat of this review, the gameplay. The game is structured into missions with 23 missions overall. Some of the missions can be extremely short even for a new player. Because of this, I think it lends itself well to various gamers. It's viable to do short sessions for people who don't have much time, or if you want to sit down and really play through it, you can finish it in less than a day. Devil May Cry is a fairly short game, something that's become almost like a staple to character action games. The average playtime for a new player on normal would probably be around 6 to 7 hours. I finished my playthrough in about 5. If you've never played a Devil May Cry, most missions will amount to getting a certain item and taking it to a location to progress. You'll be fighting any enemies along the way that block your path, and when you defeat them, they drop red orbs, which are used as currency to buy items or new moves. There's also green orbs, which restore life, blue orbs that increase health, purple orbs that increase your devil trigger gauge, and golden orbs that upon death revive you in the room right before you died. Exploring is encouraged for players because you can find more red orbs, green orbs, gold orbs, and blue shards. Find 4 of those and you get more life. Purple orbs can only be bought from a shop in the level or between missions. An interesting aspect of DMC1 is that you kind of have to balance between buying items or buying moves, because a lot of the extra moves you could buy are pricey, but man are they worth it. The combat is where I go back and forth the most often. The combat is not as in-depth as future Devil May Cry games, but it's still engaging. Dante can do different combos by pressing the attack button in various intervals, although they're all still pretty short combos, but the moves that are bought in the store can be used to extend combos. They don't increase your basic combo set in that they are automatically added to your combo. Instead, you have to use them by canceling your basic combo with one of the moves. You can even add in some gunplay as well. Although the guns typically don't do as much damage as a main weapon, they can be very useful in building up Devil Trigger or keeping an enemy in the air. However, if you're locked onto an enemy, you can evade an incoming attack by pressing the jump button, and you can also use the jump button to cancel out of moves. And all of that is fine. It's what character action is all about, giving the player the freedom to make combos in their own way. All of this on paper should make for a good experience when it comes to combat, but I'm still unsure about it. Maybe it's that looking at it in a more modern context, it feels a little bare bones. It has almost everything that a great character action game needs, and for being the first game in the genre, it's a really good take on the combat. But it's a really weird feeling playing DMC1 now, because there are times where I would get a eureka moment like, oh, I can combo this move into this, or I can chain this grenade into Stinger for more damage. Awesome. But the further I got, the more I found myself using similar combos. Most of the time, I'd use the Cerberus weapon. It did big damage and it was pretty fun to use, but the combos would always end up looking pretty similar. The same could be said for Alistair, although you can get a little more creative with it. Basically, there's a variation, but it's not enough. Thinking on it, I would find myself having the most fun when the game gives me a smaller amount of enemies to fight, even if they're the stronger enemy types. The reason being, I can focus on more creative combos while looking out for the other enemies. Some of the enemies can be a hassle to fight. While not necessarily hard, some of them require that you hit them in a specific spot. The Sins early on are a good example of this. The only way to kill a Sin is to hit it in the head. The easiest way to do that is shoot it. But the Sins are flying around the room and even going through walls, so you're forced to wait till they come out. And the camera angle can be a bit of an issue as well. The game has fixed camera angles for a lot of places. That might have been a product of it originally being a Resident Evil game, but the enemies can knock you into a different camera angle, effectively having the enemies off screen. And sometimes you might even just jump out of you because the camera isn't following you. And this has more to do with the game in general, but the 3D controls can feel a little stilted. Shocker, I know. This old PS2 game has stiff controls. It's especially apparent when trying to do platforming of any kind. The double jump does help with this, but it needs to be bought in the store and it can be kinda pricey. I can't help but feel like the combo meter also affected my enjoyment of the combat just a little bit. It felt like they tried to do something different than just how many times you can hit enemies without being interrupted or stopping. And for that, I appreciate it. The way it works is, it takes into account how much damage is being done. The rewards for getting an S on an enemy felt negligible, so I had no real incentive to try new combos. Most of the time, I just did the ones that did the most damage to try to get an S rank on an enemy. DMC1 starts off on a good difficulty for most players. The first enemies you encounter are mostly non-threatening. Puppets are slow and have a large windup for their attacks. Almost none of the hits you take in the game feel cheap, and it almost always gives a fair warning. The few times it seems like it doesn't is when an enemy is being introduced and it attacks you out of a cutscene. It is possible to dodge it, but the first couple of times it happens, it can feel unfair. Rather early on, there's a difficulty hurdle that I think will stop a lot of people. That hurdle is the first boss, Phantom, who's a big lava spider, and it feels like the pace of the combat changes drastically. One of the later bosses is also a bit of a problem, but the first boss is the most likely to stop new players. In my opinion, it was a bad decision to have the player fight the first boss so early. Phantom can do a ton of damage to the player in just a few hits. He can only be hit in his face or on his back, and he has some ranged moves as well. The safest strategy is to get a couple hits in and then move away before he attacks, but I feel this change in strategy can catch new players off guard, and coupled with his high damage, can make it frustrating. You don't have as many resources as you would later in the game. Fortunately, after that, the game does ease you back up to harder enemies. Minus the final boss, there's only 4 bosses in the game, and you fight them multiple times. Some of them are optional fights, so if you really want to, you can just leave the room, come back, and most of the time they'll be gone. But you'll be forced to fight bosses twice at the very least. I can appreciate DMC1 for being the start of a genre, and it feels like they got a lot of it right on their first attempt. The setting is pretty cool, the story isn't the most engaging thing, but it's there, and it fleshes out Dante as a character. The sound design and music are fantastic in my opinion, and the length of the game is pretty short. The option to get more out of the game is there. Even if you beat the game on normal, you will unlock hard mode, and beating that, you get a Sparta costume and unlock Dante Must Die mode. If you don't have an interest in playing the game on a higher difficulty, but still want to get more out of the game, there's 12 secret missions scattered throughout the game to beat. A word of warning though. The secret missions don't start until mission 3, and finding them can be a little tricky, some of them involving going back to rooms after a boss or mission has been beaten. The game suffers a little because of the camera and controls. It doesn't make it unplayable by any means, but it's still a bit of a hassle to try to make more accurate jumps. And the camera shift can mess with your controls. Back when DMC1 was released, its combat was new and exciting, and it's fun to play around with even today. But to me, when I think of Devil May Cry combat, I think of DMC3 and DMC4. And I feel like that's not really fair, but it's true. When I play DMC1, I can't help but think, it's alright, but it's missing a few things that would make it fantastic. Still, its combat holds up and is leagues better than action games of that era, and maybe the fact that it has less options would actually help someone new enjoy the game more. How accessible is this game to new players, and would I recommend it? The controls take a little getting used to, but they're easy enough for someone new to learn. The PS2 version of the game only has 2 control schemes, and I'm not entirely sure if the control scheme is changed for the HD version of the games. A big plus for me is that you can even skip cutscenes. If the PS2 era graphics are an issue, the HD edition on PS3 and Xbox 360 does up the graphics on everything except for some FMVs. Between the PS2 and the HD versions, I would say go for the HD version. As far as I know, there's really no difference between the two gameplay wise, and if you have both consoles, the Xbox 360 version runs just a tiny bit better than the PS3 one. So yeah, overall I would say that DMC1 is a good game, even today. What's there is fun and entertaining. That's not to say that it doesn't have its fair share of problems, but it's not enough that I would say people should pass up on it. Minus a couple bumps like the controls and difficulty, I would recommend this to new players only if they want to see what the start of the genre is like. And I would like to give a stronger recommendation to veterans of the series. Revisit it and see how far the genre has come since then. And hey, you might have fun and even be surprised by the difficulty. Alright, I think that's gonna do it for this review. But before I go, I wanted to give you guys some info. I am working on the next What Is video, and hopefully it'll be out soon, but no promises. The format that I wanted to release these videos is by doing a What Is video, and then 1 or 2 reviews of a character action game, and then back to another what is video. But yeah, that's gonna be it. I hope you guys have a good day, and I'll see you later.